Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
I was really grateful that Sean was my friend, and not just my mechanic. He was one of my closest friends, just like Todd, my best man. I met Todd in my third year of university, and I met Sean after graduation when I was midway through my commercial aviation training. Caitlin and I kept in touch with Todd, visiting him and his family every month or so. Sean, however, wasn't particularly fond of Caitlin. It might have had something to do with his deep-seated mistrust of women. A few years ago, his wife left him for another man, someone older, more sophisticated, and with money. She told Sean that this man could offer her the luxurious life she wanted, something Sean, as a mechanic, couldn't provide. I felt sorry for Sean back then, and now I was starting to understand what he had gone through. What was it with some women? At first, everything seemed fine. They were happy to get married, but over time, it was like something changed. Suddenly, we weren't good enough for them anymore. It looked like I was heading down the same path as Sean and becoming bitter about women. It wasn't fair, and I knew it wasn't what I wanted to feel. But damn, I really needed to clear my head. I wasn't ready to give up on women altogether. Not yet. One will suffice for now, I muttered. Sean drove me to my house, stopping a few houses away to check that no one was around. We saw no sign of my wife's car or any lights on inside. By then, it was about noon. If Caitlin went to church like we usually did, she would be back soon. The thought of an unfaithful wife going to church was almost ironic. If we were Catholic, she'd probably be in confession for hours. If she didn't go to church, maybe we'd have more time. In any case, I needed to get out of there as quickly as possible. Sean drove closer and parked in the driveway. We both got out of the car, and I ran to the front door to open it, looking around one last time to make sure no one was watching us. I entered the house. When I stepped inside, the living room was cleared out, as if the events of the previous night had never happened. The only thing missing was the broken coffee table, though its pieces seemed to have been cleaned up already. I noticed the photos on the dining room table from the night before, picked them up, and put them in my bag. I knew Caitlin would hate them when she saw them in daylight. I walked into the kitchen and grabbed a couple of bottles of Sam Adams from the fridge. Why not? It was my beer, and a good one at that. Then I headed to the bedroom. I pulled my suitcase out from under the bed and started packing as many clothes as I could. I went to the bathroom, grabbed my toiletry bag, and packed everything I'd need to take care of myself. When I was finished, I zipped up the suitcase and rolled it into the living room. Everything looked the same except for the missing coffee table. I looked around and noticed my cell phone and wallet on the bedside table next to the couch. I grabbed them both, putting my wallet in my pocket. There were a few missed messages on my phone, but I decided I'd check them later. I walked into my home office, grabbed my laptop bag, and opened our small safe. Inside, I took out my passport and some cash. I wasn't sure when, or if, I'd return to this house. When I finished packing, I returned to the living room. I looked around for a long time, realizing I would truly miss this house, these walls. Everything here held memories, and it broke my heart to leave it all behind. There were family photographs on the mantle, one of which I particularly liked. A photo from when we visited Caitlin's parents for Christmas about 3 or 4 years ago. I stared at it for a moment, feeling the weight of my anger. "Damn you, Caitlin," I shouted into the empty room. Sean didn't say anything, just letting me vent my frustration. I realized, with a sinking feeling, that I didn't want to keep any of those memories now. I looked around the room again, and then I spotted one photo I knew I wanted to keep. It was hanging above the sofa and showed me with my daughter when we went fishing. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old at the time. I took the photograph off the wall, placing it gently in my bag. I packed my suitcase and took one last look around the room. Sean and I finished our beers, left the empty bottles on the table, and headed out. As we reached the door, my daughter stood in the doorway, beautiful as always, with her hands on her hips. She looked shocked, to say the least. I had hoped to avoid this meeting, but deep down, I was glad she was here so I could say goodbye. I loved her almost as much as I loved her unfaithful mother, and now, perhaps even more. "Dad, what's going on?" she asked, her voice filled with confusion. I couldn't lie to her, but I had to leave out some details about my future. "Darling, after yesterday, your mother and I are facing some very serious problems. I need to go away for a while to sort out my thoughts." She seemed stunned. "What happened?" "All I can say is that your mother and I are having a hard time right now. I don't know if she told you, but yesterday we had a big argument. I'm going through a lot right now, and I'm not sure if your mom and I can overcome it. But I want you to know that I love you with all my heart." I'll always be here if you need anything. I walked up to her and hugged her tightly. I hadn't talked to her mother yet, and I was unsure how things would unfold. "Dad, what happened?" she asked, her voice trembling. I paused, trying to find the right words. "The fact is, your mother was upset with me. She thought I cheated on her. And before she even talked to me about it, she did some things to get back at me." She pulled away slightly, her frown deepening. "So, you cheated on her? Did you cheat on Mom?" she asked, her voice sharp with accusation. "Absolutely not," I replied, calmer than I actually felt. Inside, I wanted to break something, but I held it together for her sake. I would never do that. She seemed to process my words, and I could see the tension in her face ease just a little. "What do you mean when you say she took revenge on you?" she asked quietly. "You'll have to ask her about that, honey. I'm in too much pain to talk about it right now." An expression of pain crossed her face as she began to understand the gravity of the situation. I was afraid of how she would handle it, but she just nodded, tears welling in her eyes. All I could do was hold her and try to give her the strength to get through it. The truth was, I wasn't sure I had that much strength left myself. After a few minutes, she was finally able to calm down and let me go. My heart broke knowing she'd probably face even greater challenges ahead. "Damn it, Caitlin, if you had just come to me first," I thought bitterly. "Honey, remember that nothing that happens between me and your mother is your fault. Do you hear me?" I said, trying to reassure her. She nodded in response, her eyes red from crying. "Maddie, if anything happens, call me on my cell phone. When Mom comes back later, just tell her I need to go away to think, and I'll call her when I'm ready to talk." "Okay." "Okay, Dad," she said, sobbing again. "Are you going to get a divorce?" Tears welled up in my eyes again, and I tried to hold them back. "Honey, honestly, I don't know," I said softly. "I really love your mom, but I need time to think. No matter what, know that your mother and I both love you very much. You can always trust me, okay?" She nodded again, but she still looked like she was about to burst into tears. She was so strong, and it saddened me to see how my little girl had grown up. Maybe it's part of life, but it's hard to watch kids grow up. Anyone with children knows exactly what I'm talking about. She came up to me, and we hugged again, saying goodbye. "I love you very much. I'll definitely call you. You can count on it." "I love you too, Dad," she said, her voice trembling. I turned around and opened the front door. Sean was waiting for me outside. He had already carried a few of my things out while I consoled my daughter. I grabbed my laptop bag and slung my gym bag over my shoulder. We got into our cars and drove back to his place. The ride was quiet and gloomy, and even the overcast sky seemed to reflect my mood. I couldn't help but wonder where Caitlin was now. The more I thought about it, the more irritated I became. My partner definitely wouldn't escape the consequences. This was the only thing I was sure of. My car didn't have autopilot, but luckily I had some sort of automatic mode, and somehow I stayed on the road, keeping up with Sean's car on the way to his house. We unloaded my things into his guest room, and I put my toiletries in his bathroom. We sat across from each other in silence for several minutes, more lost in our own thoughts than in conversation. "That's it. I've had enough," Sean finally said. "I'm taking you to get drunk. Enough of this blues. Let's go right now." Sean was clearly feeling like I did, tired of the suffocating melancholy that hung over us like a cloud. I muttered in response, trying to show some agreement, but in reality, my mood was far from cheerful. It seemed like high society was waiting for me at such an event. I'll be honest, I'd like to say that Sean and I had a great time, laughed, and just relaxed, but that would be a lie. I still felt miserable. However, after a certain amount of drinking, I began to find humor in things. Tequila, it seemed, was my downfall. As far as I remember, that was it. Sean had us serve small shots of tequila one after another, and somewhere along the line, I passed out. I only have fragmented memories of the moments when I was still conscious, but mostly, I remember waking up still drunk. I lay on the floor next to the sofa, feeling as though I had been spun through a centrifuge. To top it all off, I was pretty sure I had nothing to my name at that moment. I didn't want to know what happened, and thought that losing consciousness was probably the best thing that had happened to me in the past few days. God, it was only 3 days ago that my wife, daughter, and I had such a nice dinner together. How could it all fall apart so quickly? I slowly stood up, walked into Sean's kitchen, and started brewing some coffee. After that, I went into his bathroom, got under a hot shower, and let the streams of water flow over my head and back. The warmth brought me back to life. I turned the tap even hotter, and the water almost burned my skin, but it felt good. Finally feeling better, I turned off the water, dried myself off, and walked out. Today was a new day. I'd find some ibuprofen, grab some freshly brewed coffee, and decide what to do with the rest of my life. I also had to figure out how to deal with my ex-partner and my stubborn wife. Thinking about the situation and putting myself in the shoes of an outside observer, I realized that Caitlin might not have been in a long-term affair with this man, but that didn't make the pain any less real. Sitting in the kitchen, drinking coffee, I again became lost in thought. Sean came out, looking as bad as I felt on the inside, and sat down across from me. "Dude, we definitely shouldn't drink tequila together," he remarked. "I agree, Sean, but I don't even remember what we did or didn't do. I seem to remember drinking tequila off some girl's belly, you trying one of those flaming shots, and me juggling jelly shots and rum and cokes. Damn, why did we drink last night?" I said with a slight chuckle. "It's all about therapy," he said, circling the word therapy in the air with his fingers. Then he put his head in his hands and whined. "Oh, I feel so bad." "You look like a reanimated corpse," I added. We sat there for a little longer, feeling sorry for ourselves and reminiscing about our stupidity. After a while, he stood up and offered a hug. I held back, trying not to cry again, but in my heart, I knew it was really necessary. This was therapy. Sean disappeared back into the bathroom, repeating the same ritual as me, hot shower and steam, while I poured myself another cup of coffee and found some ibuprofen. I swallowed 4 tablets, drinking the hot coffee, burning my gums, not paying attention to the sensation. Let this be confirmation that I am still alive, I thought to myself, sitting at my desk and listening to the sound of the shower running. I was lost in my thoughts again, just like I had been for the past few days, and even the past few years. We had been happily married, hadn't we? How could she be so easily manipulated by this narcissistic man I once called my partner? We always discussed issues of fidelity and betrayal, and we both agreed that this would never happen between us. I had always believed that we had a healthy, open line of communication. I would have expected her to at least come to me for an explanation before she threw away her marriage vows and let this man come into her life. I thought about that dinner at the restaurant, about the good times we had as a family over the past few weeks. How could something so good fall apart so quickly? How would my daughter cope with this? How could I deal with this myself? How could anyone survive such a betrayal? This self-examination was beginning to tire me. I mentally gave myself an ultimatum. I drew the line. This must end. It was time to fulfill the old wisdom my grandfather always told me when I was a child. When the going gets tough, just put one foot in front of the other. In the end, when you look up, you'll be much farther along than you thought. I looked around and saw a notepad and pen on Sean's desk. It looked like it was time to start with something concrete. I tore the sheets into 2 pages and began to write. First page, priorities 1. Find a way to punish Cyrus harshly. 2. Deal with Caitlin, either take final revenge or just leave. 3. Sell everything related to rapid relief logistics. 4. Move, but where? 5. Keep in touch with Maddie. 6. Reimburse Sean for everything he helped me with during this time. Second page, what you need to implement. 1. Divorce lawyer. 2. Corporate lawyer. 3. Several phones with disposable SIM cards, perhaps 3 or 4. 4. Find housing. It was a small notebook, and it could all fit on 1 page, but I needed to physically separate the tasks to realize their seriousness. As I was sketching out this list, I nodded internally. Yes, this was a start. Now I needed a plan to put it all into action. Of course, in reality, it would be more difficult. I wasn't James Bond, and I couldn't rely on an arsenal of spy tricks. I would have to gather more information and plan step by step. Sean reappeared, fully dressed and wearing the same determined expression as mine. We finished another cup of coffee in silence, broken only by the echoes of our own thoughts. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. "Sean, I might need your help with some of the ideas I've been throwing around here," I said, handing him the notepad. He read each line, nodding a couple of times before returning the notebook to me. "Yes, you'll definitely need help. I can help in many ways, but I won't be getting involved with Cyrus. I'm not going to jail again. I'm sorry I hid it when you hired me. Most people don't like the idea of an ex-convict working for them, regardless of the job. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner." "Sean, don't worry," I replied. "I trust you completely. Otherwise, I wouldn't have hired you. Besides, Someday I might ask you to tell me why you were imprisoned, I added with a smile. Okay, he said with a grin. Thanks. Well, as for your list, you need to find a place to live. You can stay here, but eventually, you'll have to find something permanent. Second, I know a good divorce lawyer. Her name is Sandra Collins. She's tough, a great negotiator, and she won't let you get lost in legal complications. I'm not sure about a corporate lawyer, but maybe Sandra can recommend someone. And one more thing, you should call that private investigator I told you about. He may be able to find the information you need to get justice. I just shook my head. How did it all come to this? Okay, I said. I think I'll take care of the legal issues first, and then maybe leave town for a while. I don't know where I'll move yet, but for now, I need to clear my head. Maybe I'll even use the rest of the vouchers we were going to use for the trip. I hit the table with my fist. Damn it. Sean sat quietly, letting my anger subside a little. Okay, James. Just tell me what you plan to do. And by the way, should I look for a new job? He smiled with a slight grin. I smiled back, trying to lighten the situation a little. Perhaps, but if I ever need a good mechanic, no matter where I go, you'll be the first person I call. I'm not giving up on aviation. It's the only passion I still have left, besides my daughter, I said. Okay, he nodded. That's fair. So, the first thing I need to do is make some calls. I think this will take a while, so I'll go out to the balcony if you don't mind. Sure, man, Sean replied. I walked through the glass doors onto the balcony that overlooked the river. It was nice that he had at least some kind of view from his apartment. I closed the door behind me and took out my phone. I can't say I wanted to call any of these people, but I knew I had to get it over with. All that was left was to decide where to start. First, I dialed the number of the lawyer Sean had recommended, Sandra Collins. Her assistant answered after the second ring, and after a short conversation, we set up an appointment for 1 p.m. that same day. My second call was to Kurt Simpson, the private investigator Sean had suggested. The conversation was brief. We agreed to meet at 11 o'clock in the morning. His voice was rough, and he clearly wasn't someone for small talk. After these calls, I informed Sean that I needed to take care of some business. I headed to the nearby Walmart to buy some supplies. I wasn't going to give myself a moment to think today. The whole experience still felt like a shock, like an accident where your car flips over and glass shatters around you. That's how my life seemed to be spiraling out of control. Among the things I bought were a couple of burner phones, which I planned to use a maximum of twice each. I didn't want anyone to be able to track me. I also bought items for long trips, as well as new lightweight shirts and shorts, just in case I decided to go on the trip Sean mentioned. If I did, I'd need light clothes. After loading everything into the car, I sat in the parking lot for a few minutes. My stomach reminded me that I hadn't eaten in almost 24 hours. Aside from a small snack at the bar, I had no appetite, but I knew I needed to eat something. I decided a simple sandwich would suffice. I drove around the area and stopped at a nearby fast food joint. When it was my turn, I still didn't feel like eating, but I ordered a burger and a small drink. Apparently, I looked like I was going through a tough time, as the girl at the checkout gave me a sympathetic look when I paid. I drove slowly through the city, circling familiar streets, looking at places that meant so much to Caitlin and me. Some buildings looked new, while others were old and dilapidated. I drove past the park where we had once sat on a bench together, and the memory made my chest tingle. Then, I passed an old theater that had been closed for many years. I remembered Caitlin and I going there on dates. By this point, my burger was cold, but at least I was drinking soda. Finally, I made it to the private investigator's office. It was a small room with 2 tables. A young woman was sitting at one of them, typing something on a computer. Behind her desk was another table, where the detective himself sat with a mug of coffee in his hand. He looked as rough as his voice sounded on the phone, an average height, slightly balding man with 3 days of stubble. His strong physique indicated that he never missed a workout. "Mr. Holmes," he said. "Kurt Simpson. Come in and tell me what you need." He clearly wasn't inclined to waste time. I was no longer in the best mood, so I got straight to the point. "I need to find dirt on my business partner. He betrayed me, and I want revenge," I said. "Okay, I can start today. You're lucky, I just finished a big case last week, so I have plenty of time now. I charge by the hour, and I'll bill you daily to keep you informed. Write down everything you know about this person, and I'll begin the investigation." He nodded toward the young woman at the desk. "Danny will help you with the documents and the contract." I sat down at the desk and began writing down everything I knew about Cyrus, his car, the address of his downtown apartment, and everything I knew about his family. It was strange, but I realized that he never really talked about any friends other than me. I wrote that down too, in case it was useful. When I finished, I passed the note to Danny, who turned her attention to me. "Hello, I'm Danny," she said. "Here are the forms to fill out, as well as a standard service agreement. Please fill out the top, sign, and initial where noted." She went back to her computer while I filled out the paperwork. Everything here seemed to work like clockwork. When I finished, I handed her the documents. She took the contract, made several copies, and returned one to me, placing the rest in a folder on her desk. "Thank you, Mr. Holmes. Mr. Simpson will contact you when he has information for you. The contract is completed. When you are satisfied with the information provided, payment will be billed as the data is received." I thanked her and left the office. It was bright outside, and I shielded my eyes with my hand until they adjusted to the light. I got into the car and drove to the lawyer's office. My meeting was scheduled for 1 p.m., and I had about an hour left. Sitting in the car, I decided it was time to check all the missed calls and messages. My phone had been ringing all day, but I had ignored it. As I scrolled through the missed calls, I noticed several attempts from Caitlin, a couple of calls from her parents, and one from Maddie. There was also another call from a number in Washington, probably the FEMA representative trying to reach me. He would definitely be one of the last people I'd respond to. Though, come to think of it, maybe he could help me get some information about Cyrus' activities, especially after what happened with the women he brought. I decided it was worth mentioning this to Kurt, so he could look into it. I started listening to the first voicemail from Caitlin. They were tearful apologies. She repeated that she loved me and begged me to come back. By the third message, I couldn't bear to listen any longer, so I turned off the recording. To hell with her, let her live with what she did. The message from her mother was cryptic. Apparently, Caitlin hadn't told her parents the full story. Her mother said encouragingly that Caitlin and I could survive this conflict and restore our family. The message from my daughter simply said that she wanted me to come home and that she loved me. I adored her with all my heart. It wasn't fair to her that she had to suffer because of all this. I called her back and said that I would try to sort everything out. I said goodbye, telling her I loved her and that we would see each other soon. I didn't want to stay on the line any longer than necessary for fear of losing my composure. The last message was from a FEMA representative confirming our agreements made on Saturday. The person on the other end of the line spoke briefly and formally, and I began to suspect that he might be aware of part of the scheme that Cyrus seemed to have pulled off. Thinking back to that evening with the girls, it really did look suspicious. Everything was too convenient for Cyrus. Perhaps he deliberately arranged it so that Caitlin would call at the very moment when that woman decided to start talking. I could imagine Cyrus sitting next to her, encouraging her to make the call. After deleting all the voicemails, I switched to the text messages. There were many, but the last one was from Caitlin. It came about 10 minutes after I talked to my daughter. It was short but expressive. "I'm really sorry. I'm ashamed of everything. I love you with all my heart. I always will. Kate." Well, at least she understood what she had done. I still didn't know what to do next, but I decided that I would at least go see the lawyer and explore my options. I entered the lobby and approached the front desk, where I was told to wait. A couple of minutes later, a short, strong woman with short black hair came into the hall. She was no more than 52 tall, but looked as if she could weigh 90 kilograms. This is not a criticism at all. It was just an observation. She looked like she could chew nails without breaking a single tooth. It seemed like she was the right lawyer for my case. After shaking my hand, Mrs. Collins led me into her office and closed the door behind us. We both sat down, and she started speaking. "So, what can I do for you, Mr. Holmes?" she asked. "First, I need to talk to a lawyer about selling or dissolving my business partnership. Second, I need to discuss options for divorce with my wife. I caught her cheating with my business partner. She tried to justify herself by saying that I was the first to cheat on her, but that's a lie. I've never been unfaithful to her. Oh, and by the way, she also shot me with a small pistol when I caught them. Luckily for me, the bullet hit my medallion, so I only got a bruise on my chest." "Damn right. Didn't you call the police? Did you go to the hospital or at least see a doctor? The more witnesses we have in cases of violence involving adultery, the better for your case." "No. I lost consciousness, and my friend took me to his place." "Will it help if you call the police now?" "Most likely not, but you can go to the police station and file a statement. They may start an investigation and press charges against your partner. The only problem is the evidence. They may not do anything if the weapon has disappeared and there are no traces at the crime scene. I can forward the request to our criminal defense colleagues, and we'll see what they recommend. Okay, yes, that works for me. What can I do about my wife? Do you know how long their affair lasted? Honestly, no, but I think the moment I caught them was the only one. Did you take photographs? Is there any evidence other than the fact that you saw it yourself? No, when I entered, I was shocked and didn't have time to react. I recently hired a private investigator, Mr. Kurt Simpson, to look into my partner's past. I could ask him to follow my wife as well, but what if he doesn't find anything? I know Kurt, he's good at his job. If he can't find proof of their affair, it'll be your word against hers unless she confesses. Did you talk to her after you found them? I just shook my head. I've seen many divorce cases, Mr. H, and I can tell you that you have several options. Some are straightforward, while others are more complicated. There are also cases where the real struggle begins, and that could last a year or two. Do you have children? Yes, we have a daughter, but she's already over 18. She's in college. Well, at least there won't be any problems there. You don't need to fight for custody or negotiate child support, she said, noting my expression and nodding. Yes, the process could take a long time, depending on the circumstances. What do you really want, Mr. Holmes? I need to know my options. For now, let's assume I want to get a divorce. So, you're not considering forgiveness or reconciliation? Sorry to ask, but I need to understand how best to represent you. It was a good question, and I wasn't prepared for it. I really didn't know, but I didn't want to be around her right now. I was afraid that I might do something I would regret later. I have some photographs that were given to me as proof of my betrayal, but they show that this is not true. I handed her the photographs that my ex-friend had given me. In the silence that followed, I suddenly burst into tears. All the anger I'd been carrying the last few days evaporated. Regardless, I missed my wife, and the thought of what my life would be like now seemed unbearable. I once knew where I was going, but now I was on a new path. After a minute, I wiped my eyes and looked at the lawyer. She looked at me with sympathy, then we continued discussing my options. Basically, I could file for divorce right now, but it could take a long time. Everything depends on your wife. If she agrees, it could end quickly. If she resists and demands counseling, or if the judge takes his time, the process could drag on for months. I finally asked her to file for divorce, and I told her I'd come back with a decision on whether to proceed. She also advised me to contact a lawyer named Tony McGillen about business matters. She called him a snake, but added that he's good if he's on your side. She gave me his office number, and I thanked her before leaving. I sat in the car for a few minutes, and then called Mr. McGillen. His assistant said I could arrive at 4 o'clock. It was close to Sandra's office, and I waited in the reception area for only a few minutes before being ushered down a short hallway. There were 2 other offices in this room, but I was shown to the one at the end of the corridor. Mr. Holmes, come in and sit down, said the tall, imposing man. He was well-groomed and dressed in Armani. He could have been featured on the cover of GQ magazine, rather than in a courtroom. He didn't look at all like the predator Sandra had described him as. How wrong I was. Thank you, Mr. McGillen. I came to discuss my options for selling my share in a business partnership. Partnerships are not easy to break if the partner doesn't agree to dissolve it completely or buy out the other's share. Have you already discussed this with your partner? No, and I'm not going to. For me, he's dead. He crossed a line he shouldn't have, I said, feeling the same dull rage I'd recently unleashed. A slight smile appeared on his face. Okay, tell me about the business. This is a charter airline with 2 planes. We deliver relief supplies to FEMA for minor emergencies. We also carry out one-time flights between large orders. I can go into detail, but that's the gist of it. Well, Mr. Holmes, what you're talking about usually takes time and effort. Additionally, if the partnership agreement doesn't have an exit clause, you'll need your partner's consent to sell your share. You'll both need to agree on what assets and customers will go to the buyer, and any debts the company may have will also need to be taken into account. Few buyers will want to take on a lot of debt. Damn it. Everything turned out to be more complicated than I thought. I wanted to forget about Cyrus' existence once and for all. I knew I would kill him if I saw him again. There must be another way. Understood. Well, we only have debt on 2 planes because we rent a hangar and offices. And if a partner gets into trouble with the law, what happens to his share in the business? Will he still keep his 50%? I hired a private investigator to dig into his past. It all depends on whether he is charged or not. We'll need to look at your partnership agreement, but if it contains an exclusion clause, it may be possible to ask the court to declare that he's no longer eligible to be a partner. It allows you to protect the business in the event that one of the partners gets into serious trouble, begins causing losses to the company, loses customers, or otherwise undermines its activities. In this case, you can achieve a break without paying him a share. What is the name of your investigator? Kurt Simpson. Can I send you a copy of the agreement for review? Certainly, send it, and I'll contact you once I have reviewed it. You know, if he doesn't get arrested, things could get interesting. But if they arrest him, you'll be safe. If the case goes to trial, even though it won't be easy, I can get you the result you want. It will just take more time. Don't worry. I'm pretty sure Cyrus will paint himself into a corner soon. He frowned, looking at me seriously. You're not planning to do anything rash, are you? If you have something in mind, it's my responsibility to know. No, I'm not going to do anything stupid. It's definitely not worth going to jail. I'm sure Cyrus will destroy himself. I grinned, imagining how much satisfaction the situation would bring me. He smiled as well, sensing the same darker satisfaction. We shook hands. His assistant opened the door for me, and I left the office, feeling a little better than when I entered. For the first time, I felt like I was taking control of my life. Now, all that remained was to figure out what to do with my wife. But as soon as I thought about Caitlin, my mood soured again. The sun was shining, but I didn't care. What to do with Caitlin? I still loved her, and apart from the last few days, our life had been almost perfect. But now, there was betrayal between us. I always thought that she trusted me completely, and I trusted her. Now, trust had become an abstract concept for me. I drove to the nearest park, left the car in the lot, and walked to a bench. Sitting there, I looked at the water, the light waves barely visible under the blow of the wind. I wished I could stay in that moment forever. This had happened to me before, but now I just wanted to feel this peace. I closed my eyes and slowly inhaled the scent of lilacs and honeysuckle. With my eyes closed, I felt my future slipping away from my hands. For the first time in a long time, I didn't know what awaited me. Perhaps that was what bothered me the most. I had always had a plan, a dream that I worked to bring to life. I knew where I was headed, and that path had always included Caitlin and I growing old together. Thinking about this, I began asking myself questions. Could I forgive her? Would I be able to survive her betrayal? Could I live with her like before? I really wanted to, but the problem was that she had a chance to stop everything before it even started. My lying partner had decided to play God, but she could have done something different, show respect, and at least confronted me about it before allowing him into her bed. The only thing that didn't bother me about it was the intimacy itself. Yes, I was angry that she allowed another man to sleep with her, but I truly believed that she was satisfied with me. She never complained, and this betrayal wasn't about her looking for someone better or wanting a new lover for a change. It was revenge, stupid and unnecessary. I stopped myself and told my mind to just stop. It wasn't helping. I would talk to her, give her a chance to explain herself, but I knew that for now, I would likely struggle to be around her without breaking out in anger. I would call her, but only when I could completely calm down. An hour spent on a bench alone turned out to be incredibly healing. The warm weather, the sun, and the light breeze worked their magic. I finally felt an inner peace that I hadn't experienced in a long time. I was ready to call her, and that's exactly what I did. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was weak. Hello? James, is that you? I thought about scolding her, but I kept my tone even. Yes, it's me. She immediately burst into tears, and it broke my heart. I didn't say anything, but damn, how can love be so painful? She sobbed, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I'm glad you called. I miss you so much, she paused, as if she wanted to say something else but restrained herself. I was almost about to console her but stopped myself. Why had she left me when I was hurt? Why didn't she try to stop everything before it got this far? Too many questions were running through my mind, and I needed to say something. Caitlin, I don't even know where to start, but I'm sure we both have things to regret. First of all, I never cheated on you, ever. Did you even look at those photos? The woman I allegedly had a night with is you. She interrupted me, shouting. What? No. Oh my God, Cyrus. At that moment, she burst into tears again. These photos were taken about a year ago, when you and I were making love in the backyard. It looks like someone snooped and took pictures. I continued, trying to convey my feelings to her. I'm sorry that you were deceived, but obviously, you didn't trust me enough to just come to me and ask in the first place. I fell silent, leaving the thought hanging in the air. She didn't answer. Her sobs continued to sound in the receiver. It was clear that this conversation would not be easy. She calmed down. Her sobs turned into quiet signs, and she finally spoke, clearing her throat. "James, I feel such shame and horror that I can't even explain. I know there have been difficulties between us lately, but I still want to be your wife. I never stopped loving you, even when I thought you betrayed me. I reacted so badly because I thought you deceived me." She began to cry again, but continued through her tears. "Oh God, James, I'm so sorry." I gave her a moment to calm down again and then continued. "The second thing that bothers me a lot is why did you just leave me? You knew he shot me, and you still called Sean to come pick me up. Did you run to Cyrus?" "No," she interrupted. "He wasn't important then or now. I never want to see him again." "Okay, then why did you leave me? Why didn't you stick around to help?" It was only by miracle that the bullet hit my St. Christopher medallion around my neck. Otherwise, everything could have ended much worse. She was silent for a moment and then spoke with quiet determination. "Believe me or not, I really cared about you. After well, you know." I couldn't get the look of pain on your face out of my head. Honestly, James, it was far from what I imagined it would be. I was so angry back then that I wanted to get back at you, but I never wanted you to get hurt physically. When you lost consciousness, I saw that the bullet had hit the medallion. I would never have left you if I had seen that the injury was serious. Trust me, that's the problem, Caitlin. Now, how can I trust you or believe you? I used to trust you unconditionally. Now, it's much harder." She sobbed again. "I understand. I'm telling the truth, and I can only hope that you can believe me." She paused for a second, took a deep breath to calm herself, and continued. "After I realized everything had gotten terribly out of control when he shot you, I felt numb. I rushed to you and realized that if I lost you, I would have nothing to live for. The last thing that Creep said was that he was leaving and asking if I would go with him. There's no way I would have gone with him. I stayed by your side when you passed out and checked to see if you were bleeding. When I realized you weren't, I called Sean. I knew you wouldn't want to see me when you came to your senses. If I were you, I definitely wouldn't want to see myself after that. To be honest, that's exactly how I felt then. How could you look at me and not get angry?" I tried to comprehend her words. The rational part of my mind said that there was logic in her words, even if the very fact of what happened was absolutely devoid of common sense. I still didn't understand why Cyrus did what he did. The emotional side of things has been difficult for me, and it will probably take a long time to get over it. I took a deep breath. "I think it's time for me to go. I'll call you later." "Okay, bye, Caitlin." I pressed the end button, hearing her voice in the last moment, saying, "I love you." I felt like I had received some answers, but the situation was still far from resolved. One thing remained unresolved between us, but one thing was clear: I still wanted justice. If I couldn't fix my relationship with my wife, then at least I could try to hold accountable the person who started this whole nightmare. I left the park and headed to Sean's house. I asked him to come with me to my hangar, just in case Cyrus was nearby, but my fears were unwarranted. There was no one at the hangar. I went inside and took all the valuable documents related to our partnership, as well as the company's financial statements. I didn't want Cyrus to have the opportunity to take advantage of this while I was away. While I was there, I sent a copy of our agreement to the lawyer and then left. I briefly considered leaving a note for one of the two office employees, but decided against it. It was better not to involve them without knowing whether Cyrus still planned to work. I would contact them later, after I dealt with Cyrus. Returning to Sean, I fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from everything that had happened. He woke me up around 7 p.m., and we had a quick dinner of instant noodles before we both went to bed. The night was restless, filled with nightmares. In one dream, I was flying and then suddenly began to fall. In another, I watched Cyrus take possession of my wife over and over again. I tried to scream, to call her, but she didn't hear or notice me. I woke up screaming. No. Looking around, I saw that dawn was just beginning to break through the window. I was drenched in sweat, feeling as if I had run a marathon. I felt so nauseous that I ran to the bathroom to avoid throwing up on the couch. I managed to reach the toilet in time and emptied my stomach. Sean appeared at the door. "Damn it. Dude, you scared me. Are you okay?" I wiped my face with some toilet paper and looked at him. "Do you think I look okay?" "I feel like I'll never be okay again." I got up, flushed the toilet, and washed my hands and face. As I left the bathroom, I apologized to Sean. "Sorry, buddy. I had a terrible nightmare, and it felt so real. I just can't handle it. This nightmare I'm living is becoming unbearable. Sorry, friend. Can I help you with something? We returned to the living room and both sat down. I don't even know, to be honest. I may have to leave town. If you need help, I'll let you know. Okay, fair enough. I'm going to bed. Damn early, he said, and with those words, he returned to his room and closed the door. It was still early, but I could no longer sleep. I got up, made coffee, and went to the shower. After drying off, I looked in the mirror. I still looked like myself. Why had everything changed so much around me? But I remained the same. At least the bruise on my chest was starting to fade a little. I went into the kitchen, poured myself a cup of coffee, and sat down at the table, enjoying the silence for the first time in a long time. My thoughts were blank. This was probably the first moment when I just sat and didn't think about anything. After finishing the first cup, I poured a second into a travel thermos, took it with me, and left the apartment. It was about 8 o'clock in the morning, and I hoped the lawyer was already in the office. I called but found out she wouldn't be there until 9 o'clock. Damn, what should I do now? I decided to call Kurt and see if he had any updates. He had said he had information for me, and I asked to meet him at his office before the end of the day. He said to come back in an hour, and he would share what he found. Since I had an hour to kill, I decided to stop by my house. Nothing makes you remember your pain more than looking at what you missed so badly. Since it was a weekday, she had probably already left for work. As I pulled up to the house, I saw her car in the driveway. She was sitting on the porch, holding a mug of coffee in her hands and staring at the ground, unaware of my presence. I was on the verge of stopping and talking to her, but I didn't want my anger to take over just yet. I was angry, but I would never forgive myself if I hurt her physically. I stopped at Starbucks and grabbed my third and last cup of coffee for the day. As I parked at the lawyer's office, the engine died. It was 5 minutes to 9 o'clock, so I went inside and sat down. The receptionist greeted me and said that Miss Collins would soon be finished with the current client. The waiting room in this office was no different from any other waiting room. It's funny how they all look the same, no matter where you go. The office, for example, had an aquarium, several reproductions of paintings on the walls, and furniture that looked elegant but was durable enough to last a long time. There was no aquarium, but everything else was the same. There was even a magazine stand. Sometimes, when your mind wanders, you start to notice such small, mundane details. 5 minutes later, Sandra opened the door and said goodbye to her client. He was an elderly man, probably around 70, and seemed a bit absent-minded. I thought, how sad it is that this older gentleman is seeing a divorce lawyer. Surely, there is a sad story behind this, but most likely, I will never be destined to know it. Sandra came up to me, shook my hand, and invited me to go into her office. I sat down in a comfortable chair opposite her desk, and she began. Okay, Mr. Holmes, I have the papers you asked me to prepare. Have you already decided what to do with them? She tapped the stack of documents in front of her. Honesty is the best policy. Well, almost always, she added with a slight smile. To be honest, no, I haven't made a decision yet. I've thought a lot about the situation, imagined several options, but am not ready to take any action just yet. Perhaps I'm a coward, but I just can't decide on a specific step. That's completely understandable, and you really should take your time to think it over. Moreover, it's much better to make an informed decision in a calm state than under the influence of emotions, she said reassuringly. In the heat of the moment, I nodded, encouraging her to continue. So, at your request, I have prepared a petition for divorce on the basis of irreconcilable differences. You decided not to submit documents due to infidelity. The proposed amount for the division of assets and alimony payments is quite standard, as your child is no longer a minor, so there's no need to discuss custody or child support. I sat and thought about how dry and formal we were discussing the end of my marriage. It seemed like a clinical procedure. Either I agree to have this relationship surgically removed, or I try to let it heal. So, James, you now have two main options regarding these documents. There are 4 copies in total, one for our office, one for you, one for your wife, and one for the court. You can keep them and do nothing, in which case you will remain married. Or you can give one copy to your wife and file the other, which will begin the legal process that will result in the permanent end of your marriage. The last copy will remain with you, and ours will remain with us until we destroy it after a certain time. She stopped and her tone softened. James, this is a serious step. But now, everything is in your hands. I don't envy you, but this decision must be made by you. Let me know when you decide, and I will help you complete the process if you choose to move forward. She handed me 3 neatly stapled packets. She also gave me 3 large envelopes so I could keep them safe. I left one copy to read later. "Thank you," I said quietly. "I really appreciate your help. I will definitely think about it and let you know my decision." With that, we both stood up, and she shook my hand again. I nodded and thanked her heartily. "Thank you for everything. Please, James, I sincerely hope that you can work things out." I left her office in a state of slight shock. These papers meant the end of my marriage. Though, damn it, what was I imagining? The papers were just the finishing touch. My wife had gone after Cyrus, who was planning something far worse. The problem was, I wasn't sure if I was ready to drive in that final nail. I headed straight to Kit's office and entered. He was waiting for me and looked annoyed that I was 5 minutes late. He walked around the table and handed me an envelope. I found him last night and tracked him from his apartment to the warehouse. The photographs show everything I found. I've already reported this to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and they are planning a raid within the hour. "Damn it," I muttered, looking at the photographs. Several grainy images showed Cyrus surrounded by weapons laid out on tables. Next to him stood pallets filled with all sorts of items, and at the very top were transparent bags with some kind of powder, probably banned substances. "I would have called you first," Kurt continued, "but there was no time to waste. Here's the information you need." I gave the guys at ADIF a little extra tip when I could, but honestly, his expression showed that he wasn't particularly sorry. To be honest, I didn't care. This seemed like the perfect opportunity to get back at him and move forward with the sale of the business. "Don't worry, I was the one who contacted you, so thank you. Did you find out why he wanted to get rid of me or set up his wife to cheat on me?" "Not much yet, but it looks like he's preparing for a big deal. It seems like he wanted to get you out of the way so you wouldn't interfere. He somehow needed to transport all this stuff, and your planes were the ideal solution, but not if you were nearby and found out about it. I'll continue the investigation once he's arrested. Hopefully, they'll let me in for questioning." His explanation made me think. Once again, I was surprised I hadn't realized sooner that Cyrus was a liar and a fool. I promised myself I'd never be so naive again. I thanked Kurt and handed Danny my credit card to pay for the service. After she processed the payment and returned the card to me, I left the office. By this point, my stomach was growling, so I decided to stop at the local Denny's for something to eat. As I was eating my burger, the phone rang. I put it down, wiped my hands, and answered it. "Hello, this is James." "James, this is Tony McGillen. We have a lot to discuss. Have you heard the latest news?" "What news?" "I was just talking to Sandra about a possible divorce. For now, I decided to keep quiet about the meeting with the private detective. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but the ATF and FBI just raided a warehouse near the airport. Your friend Cyrus was there. They found a bunch of illegal substances and weapons. Apparently, he got involved with some shady people. He's behind bars. Looks like this could be your chance to solve your problem with selling your business." There was a hint of excitement in his voice. At least someone could find happiness in this situation. I was just relieved that Cyrus was finally facing some kind of consequence. I understood that Kurt's call to the feds played a big role in Cyrus' downfall, but I couldn't even begin to imagine the kind of mess he had gotten himself into. Feeling grim satisfaction, I replied, "So, now I can get rid of him and sell the business?" "Practically. I'll be filing a motion in the next couple of hours to remove him from the partnership. I doubt the judge will refuse given the severity of the charges against him. There's a chance that the court will impose a temporary restriction until he is convicted, but I warn you in advance. It's okay. Just start the process. Even if his share remains, I'll still sell mine. Will I need his permission if there's a temporary restriction?" "No, unless he files a counterpetition himself, but it's unlikely he'll be able to do that." I thanked him and hung up. After paying the bill, I left the cafe and got into my car. I stopped at the exit of the parking lot. Ahead was a road I had seen hundreds of times before, but now it felt like the road to freedom. I could free myself from so many problems just by driving down it. For the first time in a long time, I made a decision instantly, feeling freer, as though my life was in my hands again. I stepped on the gas pedal and drove to Sean's house. When I entered, Sean was busy with something. Seeing me begin to pack my things, he stopped in the doorway with a raised eyebrow. "Are you leaving, buddy?" he asked. "Yes, I need a little break from all of this. I'm not sure when I'll be back, but I just need a change of scenery," I replied, continuing to pack my bags. "You need a fresh perspective, but I definitely won't find it here. It's nothing personal." Yeah, everything's fine, he said, pulling 2 bottles of beer from the refrigerator and handing one to me. Any ideas where you'll go and for how long? I'm going to Hawaii. I think a piece of paradise will help me clear my head, I answered. Sean patted me on the shoulder. Okay, if you need company there, or when you return, you know where to find me. Hell, if I had the money, I'd gladly go with you. He smiled weakly. By the way, I don't know if you heard, but he was arrested this morning for serious crimes. I have discussed with my lawyer the issue of removing him as a partner, and I intend to sell the business, so maybe you should start looking for a new job. Everything will depend on the new owners. Sorry about that, but I'll do everything I can to make sure you and the others are safe and properly compensated. Thank you. You've always been a good boss and friend, he said, giving me a one-armed hug before walking out, leaving me to finish packing. I placed the spare key to his apartment on the kitchen table and left without looking back. We had already said our goodbyes, and there was no need to make a scene. On the way to the airport, I made 2 calls. The first was to my daughter, to let her know I was leaving. I knew she would be upset, so I tried to prepare her for it. What? Dad, you can't leave, she exclaimed. Honey, I'm not leaving for good. I just need to go away for a while, take a break. You can always call me, and I won't be gone for too long, I said softly. She sobbed, and I could hear her trying to pull herself together. Okay, Dad. Promise you'll visit me soon. I promise, Maddie. You'll never get rid of me, I said, smiling to cheer her up. Besides, you'll have a great excuse to visit me in Hawaii. Not the worst place to relax, right? Hawaii? You're going to Hawaii? Oh, Dad, I'm going to miss you so much, she replied, her voice lighter. I could tell from the change in tone that she was smiling again. I love you, Dad. I love you even more, I responded. Bye now. I hung up, and the smile quickly faded from my face. That conversation was both painful and touching. I loved her more than anything in the world, and it angered me that she had to go through all of this. As expected, the second call I least wanted to make was to my wife. How could I explain to her that she had shattered my idea of our ideal life? Perhaps this is part of the problem. I would likely need to do a lot of self-reflection during this trip. Hello, she answered almost immediately after the first ring. Hello, I'm calling to let you know that I'm going away for a while. I need some time to sort out my feelings. I already called Madison. She's aware, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a brief hesitation. What about whether I want a divorce? I said, feeling anger rise up, though I didn't try to hide it. She gasped, and I heard her quietly sob. After a short pause, she spoke in a barely audible voice. I think I deserve it, but I'm begging you, please don't do it. I love you with all my heart, and I'm terribly ashamed of what I did. Trust me, I will regret this until the end of my days. Her voice cracked into uncontrollable sobs. Caitlin, my feelings for you and the pain of what you did are tearing me apart right now. This is my problem. I want to believe you, but I don't know what to believe. My whole life has turned upside down in just a few days. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. How could you? You didn't even give me a chance to explain, I said, anger overwhelming me again. I fell silent, taking a moment to calm myself. I could hear her sobbing loudly, probably in shock. I had never yelled at her, not even during our worst arguments. In a calmer tone, I continued, I'll be gone for a while and probably won't answer your calls. If you need someone to talk to, call our daughter. She is a victim in this, just like me, and right now she feels alone and hurt. I paused before adding, I have to go now, but maybe I'll call later when I've made up my mind. James, she sobbed, I'm scared. I love you so much and don't want to lose you. Oh God, I'm so sorry. At this point, her voice broke again into loud sobs. I couldn't find any compassion left in me. Goodbye, Caitlin, I said, then I hung up. I switched my phone to vibrate mode and put the earphone in my pocket. It was over. As I pulled into the airport parking lot, I found a space quickly, parked, and entered the terminal. I checked in my luggage, got my ticket, and went to the waiting area, where I planned to have a couple of drinks before the flight. Surprisingly, I didn't think about my ruined life at all. Instead, I just sat in silence, sipping my drink and observing the people around me. This had always been my favorite pastime, imagining what others were doing, what they were thinking, what their lives were like. I noticed an older couple sitting nearby. I looked around the airport, noticing a couple who seemed to be having trouble getting tickets. I wondered if they were going on vacation or returning home after visiting family. How long had they been together? Did they love each other as much as they did in the past? Nearby, I noticed a young woman in a flight attendant uniform sitting with a cup of coffee. Was she waiting for another flight? Or was she returning home after a long day of work? Did she have a boyfriend or husband waiting for her at home? How challenging must it be to maintain relationships when you work in a job where you're away a lot? Two middle-aged men sat nearby, drinking beer and discussing the match being shown on the big screen. It looked like they were on a business trip. Did they have wives waiting for them back home while they were away? How do people manage to maintain relationships when they have to travel so frequently? I couldn't help but think that some people seemed to make it work, but I didn't quite understand how. Traveling had become a big issue in my own marriage, even though, for the most part, I was only gone for a few days at a time. There had only been a couple of instances when I had to stay longer, and on those occasions, Caitlin joined me. After finishing my second glass, I placed the empty glass on the counter and paid the bill. Just as I was about to get off the bar stool, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I regretted not turning it off earlier. I looked at the screen and didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. "Hello, this is James," I said, trying to keep the irritation from my voice. "Mr. Holmes, this is Tony McGillen. Sorry to bother you, but I just spoke with a potential buyer. If you're interested." I felt a bit embarrassed for answering so bluntly. "Sorry, Tony, it's just been a very long day." "So, you already have a buyer?" "I know, but you pay me to work for you," he said, his tone making everything clear. "It looks like you have a partner company on the West Coast, and they want to expand here." I barely had time to send out requests before they agreed to fly here this evening. "Okay, but I'm leaving for a while. I'm at the airport, waiting for my flight. Once you agree to the transaction, I'll only need a limited power of attorney document to sign on your behalf. Do you agree to this? If we agree on the amount, send me the document to sign by email, and I'll sign and return it to you. If everything is in order, make sure they understand that we are already staffed, and I would prefer not to leave anyone unemployed if possible. I'll explain everything. I'll send you the document, but to make it official, you'll need a certified signature in the original document. So, I'll include our office address for mailing. Well, if their offer suits me, I'll give you the green light to sell. Thanks for your help. I'll send everything as soon as I can." After that, I hung up and finally decided to turn off my phone. I didn't want to talk to anyone anymore. The boarding process for my flight began soon. People with disabilities and those who paid for additional privileges were invited to board first. I got a window seat, but I was still in economy class, so I had to wait. A few minutes later, they announced that it was time for passengers in my section to board. I found my seat and quickly placed my carry-on luggage under the seat in front of me. After sitting down, I looked out the window, watching the bustle on the ground. Planes on adjacent taxiing strips were taking off and landing. It took a few more minutes for everyone to settle into their seats before the usual pre-departure announcements were made. I no longer paid attention to them. I leaned my head against the window and closed my eyes. As difficult as the past few days had been, I was finally starting to do something about it. I barely caught the pilot announcing our flight to Hawaii before I fell into a peaceful, undisturbed sleep, free of nightmares. I hoped this calm would continue.